Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Richard and I had been married for 5 years when we decided it was time to expand our family. We first met during a deposition at an insurance company where I worked. Richard was the lead attorney representing the plaintiff, and I was part of the defense team. His sharp mind and relentless ambition made it clear right away that he was on a fast track to partnership and millions on the path to justice. Although I considered myself a capable lawyer, I never thought I was at his level, so I was genuinely surprised when he reached out to me after the case was over. Our relationship blossomed quickly, growing over dinners, late-night cocktails, and various social events. Richard was witty and charismatic, holding my attention with every conversation. Our physical chemistry was just as strong. He was an attentive and inventive lover, and I responded with equal passion. Soon we were married and living in a luxurious gated community among those who had made it. We bought a massive 4-bedroom single-story home, which seemed excessive for just the two of us, but we thought it would allow room to grow, maybe even hire a nanny if I returned to work after having children. Like many young couples with financial success, life seemed perfect. The only real issue we faced was Richard's demanding work schedule. While my job was a simple 9 to 5, Richard was always chasing the next big case to make partner at his firm. This left me with all the social obligations in our prestigious neighborhood, attending barbecues, wine tastings, and other events typical of our close-knit elite community. It was at one of these events that I grew closer to Mary, which eventually led me to meet her husband, Michael. Their relationship sparked my curiosity, and with time on my hands, especially during the last month of my pregnancy, I decided to get to know them better. I didn't hire a private investigator or anything dramatic like that. Instead, I simply became friends with Mary, who, like me, wasn't working at the time. She lived just a couple of houses away, and I felt drawn to their seemingly simple life. It was like a puzzle I wanted to solve. Michael was an accountant with his own small practice. Unlike other men in the neighborhood, who were always networking or flaunting their success, Michael seemed uninterested in expanding his business or forming new connections. He looked like a typical accountant, mid-40s, balding, a bit on the heavier side, but not excessively so. He didn't give the impression of ever being particularly athletic, more of a quiet, scholarly type. He often seemed a little out of place at social gatherings, especially since he didn't participate in typical male activities like golf or drinking. Around women, he was always polite and respectful, but never flirted or was overly friendly. Mary, on the other hand, was the complete opposite of her husband. She was stunning, lively, and flirtatious, with an energy that naturally drew people to her. At 37, she looked even younger, with a figure that caught attention, particularly her voluptuous curves and noticeably enhanced chest. Every movement she made exuded confidence and undeniable sensuality. Despite her flirtatious demeanor, Mary was fiercely loyal to Michael. I saw her lose her composure only twice. Once when a group of men mocked Michael in her presence, and she quickly put them in their place, and another time when a well-known neighborhood playboy tried to hit on her. She made it clear right away that she wasn't someone to mess with. Mary let everyone know that her heart belonged only to Michael. Their love was so strong that it almost annoyed those of us who observed it from the outside. Strangely, Michael didn't seem to realize just how deeply Mary adored him. He treated her with kindness and respect, but didn't notice her fiery devotion the way we did. Maybe he had simply gotten used to it over the years and started taking it for granted. Despite their financial stability, they lived more modestly compared to others in our neighborhood. They had enough money to fit in, but they didn't flaunt it. Their cars were ordinary, and they avoided excessive luxury. No boats, no oversized TVs, no massive home renovations. They had a pleasant backyard with a pool, and their grill was functional but not fancy. I never heard Mary complain about money, even though she didn't wear the latest fashions or adorn herself with jewelry, aside from her wedding band, engagement ring, and a simple pair of gold earrings. It was clear that they had the means for extravagance, but they chose not to participate in the race for flashy wealth that characterized our community. Mary and Michael had 2 children, a 7-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter, both well-behaved and sweet. They hired a nanny to help with the kids and household chores, but Mary remained actively involved in raising them. Their family life seemed ideal in the best sense of the word. Despite living in an environment where material values played a significant role, they appeared genuinely happy without feeling the need to showcase their success. I had always known that Mary's son attended one of the most prestigious private schools, but it never seemed like anything special, especially since he was only 7. Mary handled his daily routines, dropping him off and picking him up. The boy's father was always busy with work, and when needed, a nanny would step in. At the time, I was 8 months pregnant and had taken a break from work. I had gotten used to taking short morning walks to stay active, but tried not to stray too far from home. One morning, during one of these walks, I ran into Mary as she was driving her son to school. We exchanged a few polite words, and I suggested we meet for coffee later. She already had a packed schedule, taking her son to school, going to the gym, and doing some shopping, but she promised to stop by for coffee around noon. I had a feeling something was bothering her, but I didn't expect that today would be the day she opened up. As it turned out, I was wrong. When Mary came by later, coffee in hand, our conversation naturally shifted to children and pregnancy. I casually asked if she and Michael were planning to expand their family. Her response caught me off guard. "That depends on Michael. I'll do whatever he wants. If he wants more children, we'll have them. If not, we won't." As she said this, I noticed her absent-mindedly twirling a small gold earring, a habit I'd seen before whenever she talked about her husband. It was clear that this was a painful topic for her. "But you should also have a say in this decision," I remarked. "We're not living in the 19th century. Michael can't force you to have a child." Mary chuckled softly, but there was a hint of unease in her laugh. "Michael would never do that. He's the kindest person, honestly. I couldn't find a better husband. He would never pressure me. It's just, I'm willing to do anything to make him happy. If that means having more children or not, as long as he's content." "Do you really love him that much?" I asked, surprised by her devotion. "Everyone can see how you treat him, like he's some rare treasure. You're always so attentive, but sometimes I feel like he doesn't fully appreciate everything you do for him." Mary twirled her earring again, a clear sign of her anxiety. "And I hope he never finds out," she muttered under her breath. Her words struck me as odd, so I pressed on. "You don't want him to know how much you care? It's complicated," she whispered almost inaudibly. "Let me ask you a question, Margaret. You're a lawyer, right? If I tell you something in confidence, do you have to keep it secret, like between a lawyer and a client?" "Yes," I replied, "but only if you officially hire me. Are you in some kind of trouble? Is Michael hurting you in any way?" She quickly shook her head. "No, nothing like that. I just need to share something, and I have to be sure no one else will ever know. How do I hire you?" "It's simple," I explained. "You just need to make a small payment, even something symbolic, and we can establish attorney-client privilege." Without hesitation, Mary reached into her bag and pulled out a $20 bill with a smile. "Consider yourself officially hired." Relaxing a bit, Joan leaned back and began her story. "I grew up in this neighborhood. My father was a roofer, but he spent half his earnings at the bar, so we were always living paycheck to paycheck. My mother worked as a hairdresser, but even with her income, we stayed at the lower end of middle class. Between my father's drinking, cheating, and constant fights, I'm honestly surprised I even finished school. After high school, I took some secretarial courses and got a job at a pretty awful agency. I mostly handled paperwork and filled in for employees on short-term contracts. That's when I met Michael. His secretary was going on maternity leave, and I was hired to temporarily replace her." "And when was this?" I asked, curious about the timeline. "About 14 years ago," she replied. "I was 25 then. By that time, I'd already had my share of fun and was starting to think about settling down. Back in those days, I admit I had big plans for a wealthy life. I wanted to marry rich, live with him for a few years, and then leave with enough money to live comfortably. Michael seemed like the perfect candidate. He was 33 at the time, 8 years older than me, and even more naive than he is now. I never considered him particularly wealthy, but he owned his own business, had a nice apartment in a decent area, and seemed to meet all the criteria of an ideal husband. After my work at his company ended, we started dating, and soon I moved in with him. A year later, we got married. Michael was sweet and always accommodating, and I was confident I could manage him as much as I needed to. He trusted me completely and didn't even ask for a prenuptial agreement. I wouldn't say I'm proud of being a gold digger, but I don't have any regrets about it either. So here I am, married for 13 years, and still content. We had a fairly typical engagement. The only condition I set before agreeing to marry was that I wanted us to have our own home, a real house we could call ours. Having lived my whole life in rented apartments, I wanted something permanent. We searched, and eventually found the house we live in now. At first I thought the price was too high, but Michael insisted that we needed a spacious place, just in case we had kids. I didn't want children, but I didn't want to disappoint him before the wedding. The most pleasant part for me was that he didn't even blink at the cost, and had no problem adding my name to the deed. However, right before the wedding, something happened that seemed insignificant at the time, but later turned out to be a turning point in my life. What was it? Well, shortly after our engagement, Michael suggested having dinner with his old school friend. We went to a small restaurant, one of those cozy places that feels more like someone's warm family home than an ordinary eatery. The atmosphere was intimate, with touches of sophistication. When we arrived, Michael briefly spoke with the maitre d', mentioning the name of the person we were supposed to meet, and suddenly the mood shifted. We were led to the best table, and soon a bottle of premium wine was brought to our table as a complimentary gesture. The service was impeccable. 2 waiters were constantly nearby, making sure everything was perfect. When our dinner was almost over and Michael's friend still hadn't shown up, 2 burly men entered the restaurant, surveyed the room, and sat at some distance from us. One of them left the restaurant briefly and returned with 2 other men, one impeccably dressed about Michael's age, and the other much older. Michael stood up, embraced them, and introduced me to his old friend Oscar and his grandfather, Oscar Garcia. These 2 were nothing like Michael. When I asked him about them later, he simply said Oscar was an old school friend. Their visit was brief. The elder offered a short toast, wishing us all the best before the wedding, and they drank to our future. Oscar gave me a wedding gift, a stunning pair of diamond earrings, which I later found out were worth around $15,000. After a few hugs, they left. None of them came to the wedding, and I didn't see Oscar again for the next 2 years. Life went on in the usual whirlwind of wedding preparations, moving into the new house, buying furniture, and settling into married life. I soon forgot about that dinner entirely. Michael went to work every day, but he didn't seem particularly ambitious. I asked him a few times if he wanted to expand the business or take on more clients, but he was perfectly content with what he had. Money was never an issue. I didn't know how much he had, but whatever purchase came up, the price never seemed to bother him. So how was our married life? Let's just say we found our rhythm. Michael was kind, gentle, and incredibly sweet, but sometimes that's not enough in certain areas of a relationship. Before the wedding, I had been with a few men who enjoyed a bit more passion, something Michael never offered. To be honest, I missed it. At the time, I wasn't ready to leave the marriage, not until I knew for sure how much Michael was worth. But the desire for something more exciting remained. I wasn't about to pursue this desire at home, considering our nosy neighbors, so I signed up for a gym. I genuinely wanted to stay in shape, but I made sure to hire an attractive personal trainer. George, my trainer, was full of energy, putting everything into our workouts, and soon I began looking at him differently. He was half Italian, tall, with a body sculpted like marble. Before long, we began an affair, meeting in hotels a few times a week for passionate encounters. His stamina was incredible, giving me exactly the adrenaline rush I had been missing. Yes, I was cheating. Did Michael ever find out? No, he never did. He remained blissfully unaware, but the way things unfolded in the end was far worse than you can imagine. The whole situation fell apart in the most horrifying way. There was one time when Michael had to go on a business trip for a few days. George and I, taking advantage of his absence, planned to spend the night together at a hotel. It was something new for us. We'd never gone that far before. Usually, we would just carve out a couple of hours during the day when the opportunity arose. But this was supposed to be special. A whole night together. But honestly, I hardly remember anything from that evening. It's as if everything was shrouded in a haze, like we were drugged without even realizing it. The night passed in a blur, and then suddenly men burst into the room, harsh, brutal. They dragged us into a car by force and took us to some abandoned warehouse. I knew George was involved in something shady, maybe steroids, and I assumed that's what had landed us in trouble. I thought I was just an innocent bystander caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. "You mean you were kidnapped?" I asked, feeling my stomach twist in horror. "What happened next? How did you get out of there? Did Michael find out?" She continued, her voice taking on a strange, almost emotionless tone, despite the terror in her story. The way she described it sent chills down my spine. "When the drugs started to wear off," she said, "I realized I was tied to a chair. My wrists and ankles were bound with bandages, probably to avoid leaving marks. And there were more bandages over my mouth so I couldn't scream. It was odd. They were careful not to leave a single bruise on me, but I didn't understand why. But they weren't so gentle with George. They cuffed him and hung him from a rope tied to the ceiling, right in front of me." She paused for a moment, as if gathering the strength to relive those memories again. Two men came in and tore George's shirt off, ripping it at the cuffs. They spread a plastic sheet beneath him and started beating him with chains. Thick, heavy chains. His wrists bled from the way the handcuffs dug into his skin. His screams, he screamed over and over. Her voice faltered for a moment, as if she could still hear those screams in her head. "The screams eventually stopped," she continued, her voice eerily calm. "I think he lost consciousness. His eyes were so swollen they were completely shut." Her hands trembled slightly as she took a deep breath. "Then they brought in a forklift. They threw him into a barrel, sealed it, and rolled it away." I stood frozen, my mind struggling to process the horrors she was describing. She paused for a moment before continuing. "After that, I blacked out. When I woke up, I was still tied to the chair. Across from me, in another chair, sat Oscar. He's a friend of Michael's. One of the men came up to me, removed the gag, and freed one of my hands. I just sat there, too stunned to react in any way. Oscar offered me a flask. I took a sip and coughed as the alcohol burned my throat. It was strong, but I needed it. The warehouse was freezing, and I wasn't dressed for the cold. The alcohol gave me a little warmth. Then Oscar spoke, his voice unsettlingly calm. "Mary, we need to talk, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Can you do that?" I nodded. What else could I do? Oscar asked, "Does Michael know about the man you're seeing?" "No," I replied. "I've been careful. Michael doesn't know anything." Then he asked if there was any chance I was pregnant by George. "No," I quickly assured him. "I'm on birth control. I'm not ready for kids." "And Michael knows about that?" Oscar's tone hadn't changed, but there was a new coldness in his eyes. "No," I whispered. "He doesn't." "Mary, do you really love your husband? Do you believe you can give him the happiness he deserves?" Without hesitation, she replied, "Yes, I love him, and I know I can make him happy." I was about to continue, but he raised his hand to stop me. "You may not realize it," he began slowly, "but your husband is one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. If he wanted to, he could be a brilliant writer or even a famous scientist. His financial acumen is unmatched, yet he runs a modest office with only a few clients." He paused briefly before adding, "Among his clients are my family, a few trusted friends, and some of our business partners. But there's another side, one more dangerous. Very powerful groups in this country also use his services. Michael is incredibly talented, but perhaps because of that, he has certain peculiarities. We accept that. All we want is his happiness. Many people care deeply about his well-being, and as you've seen today, some are willing to go to extreme lengths to ensure his happiness." His gaze narrowed as he continued. We believe you're part of that happiness. You can make him happy, can't you? I know I can, I said quietly. I love Michael deeply. Excellent. Let's be frank with each other. I speak with Michael often, and he's madly in love with you. He sees you as the perfect wife, the future mother of his children. I don't want that image shattered. We both know you're after his money, but what you don't understand is that his fortune is far greater than what you've seen. If you're planning to get close to him, know this. There are many people who won't let you touch him. They'll do whatever it takes to protect him. He shifted slightly in his chair. Soon, my people will make sure you return home safely. There's no need for Michael to know about this conversation. Leaning closer, he added, wait a month. When you're sure, stop taking the pills. Give Michael the family he's always dreamed of. Can you do that? Yes, I can, I whispered. Good, he said, his voice turning cold. I don't want to see you again. If we meet again, it will end badly for you. There are many ways to die, from a road accident to a botched robbery, and Michael will never know the truth. But before that, you'll experience a real nightmare. So don't give me a reason to interfere in your life again. And most importantly, don't do anything that could upset Michael. A menacing silence hung between us. I sat in a stupor, too stunned to say anything. Meanwhile, Mary seemed almost satisfied as she told her story. She finished. Michael never found out. I made sure of that. Since then, every day I do everything I can to make him happy, because my life depends on it. She paused before adding, a month later I received a package. Inside were these earrings. She pointed to the earrings she was wearing, and a card signed by Oscar. I wear them every day, so I never forget. Intrigued, I asked, what's the meaning behind these earrings? She carefully removed one and handed it to me. A small pendant hanging from it was an intricately crafted golden replica of a 55-gallon barrel, stunning in its detail. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. George Garcia once thought his life was perfect. His wife, Patricia, seemed to embody all of his dreams. Beautiful, smart, and, as he believed, utterly devoted to him. They first met in college while both were engrossed in their respective studies. George was studying to become an engineer, and Patricia was on her way to becoming a lawyer. However, fate brought them together in a creative writing class, which neither of them had particularly chosen. Their last names, Anderson and Garcia, placed them next to each other by chance, and it was here that George first felt Patricia's charm. Though George wasn't the most attractive guy on campus, that didn't matter. They instantly clicked, sharing jokes and laughter in the midst of the dry, strict academic environment. Their friendly conversations in class soon evolved into meetings outside of it, and before long, friendship blossomed into something more. What started as light companionship quickly transformed into a relationship that provided both of them relief from the stresses of their studies. Their bond was filled with joy, laughter, and undeniable physical chemistry. One evening, in the middle of the semester, what began as a simple dinner and movie unexpectedly turned into an unforgettable night. That night, George walked Patricia home, intending only to say goodbye, but a simple farewell kiss turned into something much more. One kiss led to another, and the next morning George woke up in Patricia's bed. From that moment on, their relationship grew even stronger, and by the start of the next semester, they were completely devoted to each other. Between their intense studies and their blossoming romance, they barely had time for anything else. As time went on, their relationship only deepened. They began introducing each other to their families. Patricia joined George's family for Thanksgiving, and George spent Easter with Patricia's family. For Christmas, they decided to stay on campus, enjoying the solitude and each other's company. Their families fully approved of their relationship, and when graduation approached, no one was surprised when George proposed to Patricia, and she immediately accepted. Both felt their relationship was something special, and they weren't about to let it slip away. After college, they transitioned into their careers effortlessly. George secured a position with a construction company that valued his hands-on approach to engineering, while Patricia began her career at a prominent law firm. Their demanding jobs left little free time, but they always found moments for each other, whether it was vacations, busy weekends, or passionate nights. Time flew by, and before long, 7 years had passed. As their wedding anniversary approached, George decided it was time to think about the future. He envisioned them starting a family, buying a house, and building something more permanent than their current apartment. Financially, they were both doing well, and George believed it was the perfect time to plan the next phase of their life. However, Patricia didn't share his vision. Strangely, they had never discussed their future beyond the wedding. They never argued, and Patricia seemed completely content with their life. She saw no reason to change anything. Maybe one day she would be ready for more, but at that moment, she was happy with how things were. A few days before their anniversary, George was in the kitchen making dinner. This had become his routine since he finished work earlier than Patricia. He was in the middle of cooking when Patricia came home and, as if nothing was out of the ordinary, dropped a bombshell that changed everything. "I have a date this Friday," Patricia said calmly as she walked into the house. George froze, unable to comprehend what he had just heard. Surely he misunderstood her. He asked her to repeat herself, and she did so with the same calmness. She had agreed to go on a date with a man named Connor, casually adding the affectionate nickname Con, as if it were the most normal conversation. At that moment, George's world collapsed. Shock gave way to a flood of questions. "Why? Are you unhappy? Have you been cheating on me? Do you want a divorce?" His mind raced, searching for answers. How could this have happened? Who was Connor? What had he missed? Their relationship, even their intimate life, seemed so solid. Patricia, seemingly unaffected, answered with a chilling calm. "It's simple," she said, as if explaining something obvious. "I get attention all the time. Even when we're together, you've seen it. Throughout school and university, dating was never my focus. All my time and energy were dedicated to studying and earning my degree. But lately, you've been pushing me more and more towards the idea of settling down, buying a house, and starting a family. So, I thought, why not try dating? Besides, there's this incredibly attractive guy who's been flirting with me. Probably the most handsome guy who's ever shown interest in me." George froze, stunned. "Well, thank you, Patricia. What a great boost to my self-esteem," he replied, his voice laced with sarcasm. "And what about us? Are you just going to toss me aside like an old toy?" "Oh, George, come on," Patricia responded. "You know you're handsome, and I love you. It's just something fun I want to try. It's not like it's serious." George felt anger boiling inside him. "Well, I absolutely disagree," he snapped. "I think you shouldn't be dating other men. It'll destroy everything we've built." Patricia rolled her eyes and let out a heavy sigh. "George, I didn't realize you were so dramatic. You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's just one date, nothing special." Deciding not to let her belittle him, George replied, "Fine, if it's such a minor thing, then I'll go on a date too." Patricia couldn't hold back her laughter. "You? On a date?" She laughed, incredulous. "You're kidding, right? You couldn't find a date by Friday if your life depended on it." Her laughter grew louder, filled with condescension. "Look, it's easy for women to get dates, even if they're not supermodels. But for men, especially those who aren't drop-dead gorgeous, that takes effort. You're sweet, George, but attractive? Not exactly." Her laughter echoed through the room, and George felt his patience snapping. He couldn't believe she was mocking him like this. First, she announced she was going on a date, and now she was humiliating him, saying he could never do the same. Her relentless laughter was the final straw, like a knife twisting in an already open wound. He couldn't take it anymore. But instead of lashing out, George made a choice. He needed to leave before things went too far. "Patricia, I'm too angry to think clearly right now. You blindsided me, and now you're laughing at me." With those words, he stormed out of the house, heading to his friend Robert's place. Robert had been his closest friend for years. They played video games, drank together, and understood each other without needing many words. That evening was no different. George didn't explain why he was there, and Robert didn't ask. That was the nature of their friendship. The next morning, George arrived at work with a pounding headache and a bit late, for the first time in his life. Megan, the office administrator, immediately noticed something was off. She had always had a soft spot for George, but chose not to say anything. His boss, if he noticed, said nothing either. George was too reliable for anyone to make a fuss over one bad day. That evening, when George returned home, he didn't want to make dinner for both of them, but out of habit, he did it anyway. Patricia came in at her usual time, and, as expected, she couldn't resist another jab. "Oh, back after your little temper tantrum?" she mocked, a smug smile on her face. "So, any updates? Still planning on finding yourself a date by Friday?" Her words dripped with arrogance. George looked at her, barely recognizing the woman standing before him. When had everything gone so wrong? Where had the love and joy in their marriage gone? In a calm but firm tone, George repeated, "Patricia, if you go on this date, it will destroy us. And I'm serious. If you don't cancel it, I will go on a date this Friday, too." He braced himself for another dismissive response, but what she said next cut him like a knife. "Oh, really? And who are you planning to go on a date with? Megan from your office?" she sneered. "She's old enough to be your mother, weighs as much as a hippo, and is married to a man who'd probably kill you if you even looked her way. There are no other women left at your work, so who are you going to date? Maybe you'll ask one of the guys out? Yeah, that'll go over real well." Robert was the last one left. George suspected that he might have a girlfriend, so if Robert wasn't interested in relationships with both genders, his luck had clearly run out. Maybe it was time to call an escort? After all, paying for company wasn't really cheating, right? George wondered if Patricia had any idea that her mocking, dismissive laughter was slowly eroding his love for her, like acid eating through steel. Who was this woman she had become? Were all the good moments they had shared just a mask hiding her true nature? George felt utterly drained, not just physically, but spiritually. In silence, he headed to the bedroom. Patricia came in later, surprised to see that he was already fast asleep. It was usually George who initiated their intimate moments, but tonight he had no desire for that. She felt her usual longing, but waking him didn't even cross her mind. Their physical closeness had always been consistent, especially on weekends, so this sudden distance felt strange to her. By midweek, when Patricia came home from work, she found George furiously typing on his phone. They had always agreed, no phones after work, so they could focus on each other over dinner. The food was already ready, but George didn't even look up when she entered the room. A sly smile appeared on her face, and she let out a short laugh. "Trying to make me jealous, George?" she asked sarcastically, her voice dripping with scorn. "No kiss today? Too busy with your Friday night plans?" Her tone was sharp, and she continued, "Who's texting you? Megan? I bet her husband would love to know. Or is it Robert? Are you two up to something, George?" Her laughter grew louder, turning into a cackle. Each mocking remark stabbed George in the heart like a knife. With every word, his feelings for her seemed to wither. He began to resent her more and more. Slowly, he raised his head from his phone. "Patricia, this has to stop." His voice was calm, but there was a weight to it. "You're destroying us with these jokes and barbs. If this keeps going, I'm warning you, our marriage won't survive." For the first time, Patricia fell silent. She shrugged, as if brushing it off. "Oh, George, relax. It's just one date. You'll survive. It's no big deal. I told you, I just want to know what it's like to go on a date with an incredibly attractive person. I've never done it, and I'm just curious." George's frustration grew. "We made vows to each other, Patricia. What we have is supposed to be special, and you're tearing it apart." He turned and went upstairs, leaving her alone in the kitchen, where the tension hung in the air. The next day, Patricia came home to an empty house. George arrived later, but something was different. His hair was freshly cut, styled in a way he hadn't worn it in years. It reminded her of when they first met, though she preferred his current look. Unable to resist, she made a sarcastic comment. "New haircut for your big night out?" she said with a smirk, deliberately making air quotes, then burst into laughter. "I'm sure Robert will appreciate it when you two meet on Friday." George completely ignored her, walked past, and headed to the bedroom to change. But what he saw in the bedroom only added fuel to the fire smoldering inside him. When he returned to the kitchen, Patricia was already waiting with that familiar smirk. "I noticed a Victoria's Secret bag on the dresser," she said innocently. "Interesting choice. So did you buy yourself some lingerie for your just a night out? Looks like more than just a meeting." Her words were like poison, but she didn't stop. "What kind of lingerie did you pick, George? Funny, you never wore anything like that on our honeymoon. I remember asking about wedding night lingerie, and you said your body was more than enough for me. And now you're buying this. If it's just a date, I guess he won't even see it, right?" George's anger flared, but he fought hard to keep it in check. His fists clenched, his jaw tightened. He wanted to explode, but somehow he managed to hold himself back. In the chaos of the last few days, George was barely keeping afloat. Patricia, whether blissfully unaware or completely indifferent to his inner turmoil, continued to behave as if nothing had changed. She seemed lost in her own thoughts, lightly smiling to herself. "You have to be a special kind of person," she said thoughtfully, her tone carefree, "to remain the most attractive guy." She cast a fleeting glance at George and casually shrugged. "It just makes me feel even more attractive." George's patience, already hanging by a thread, snapped. His words came out cold and sharp. "Oh, how great that my confidence is just fine," he responded sarcastically. But Patricia kept going in the same vein. "It's so important for me to see you in your underwear, and now some random guy gets that pleasure on what you call just a date?" George's irritation reached its peak. "Let's get something straight, Patricia. This has gone too far. If you put something on for me tonight and cancel your date tomorrow, I might be able to get through this. But if you don't, if you really go on that date, we're done." Patricia giggled, completely ignoring the seriousness of his words. "You're always so desperate for intimacy," she waved dismissively. "I've waited all week, and this is the longest I've gone without it." "It's always about you, isn't it?" she continued, a challenge in her voice. "I can do whatever I want, and I don't have to wear something just for you." George stared at her, his gaze hardening, making her squirm nervously under his scrutiny. After a tense pause, George finally spoke. "If you go on that date on Friday, we will never make love again." With that, he turned and walked toward the bedroom, leaving her to ponder his ultimatum. Friday arrived, and as promised, George did nothing to prepare dinner. He was already making plans for himself when Patricia returned from work. She found him dressed to the nines. He wore a freshly ironed shirt and new trousers, looking even better than usual. This only intensified her irritation over their recent lack of intimacy. At one point, she considered making the first move, but her stubbornness won out. She wasn't going to be the one to initiate. Patricia had her own plans for the evening. She began getting ready for her date, noticing something odd in the apartment, but she dismissed it, too preoccupied with the excitement of meeting Ted to think much of it. George left, and soon after, Patricia also departed, meeting Ted at a trendy restaurant. Dinner went smoothly. Ted was charming and attentive, entertaining her all night. When dinner ended, Ted suggested continuing the evening at his place, and Patricia, without hesitation, agreed. She imagined an exciting, passionate night, but reality was far from her fantasy. As soon as they walked through the door, Ted's behavior shifted abruptly. He pushed her onto the couch and sneered, "Bet you love being easy prey." The words stung, and all her enthusiasm evaporated. She quickly slipped out of the situation, trying to preserve a shred of dignity. The night was still young, and going home would mean admitting defeat, so she went to her friend Emily's place. She spun a fabricated story about a fight with George, and Emily gladly welcomed her. They spent the night watching romantic comedies and drowning their frustrations in cheap wine. The next morning, Patricia woke up with a pounding headache, the hangover a harsh reminder of the previous night. Emily suggested they go shopping to clear their minds, and Patricia, in no rush to return home, agreed. When she finally got back, it was well past dinner. She expected to find George brooding, but instead, the apartment was empty. It was only then that she noticed what had been off all along. George's things were gone. His work boots weren't by the door, and his side of the dresser was cleared out. She smirked, shaking her head, deciding that this was just an overreaction on his part. "He'll come crawling back," she muttered, with his tail between his legs, begging to forget all about this. She also wondered how his own night had gone, quietly laughing at the thought. But by the following Saturday, her amusement had worn thin. George still hadn't returned, and there wasn't a word from him, not a single call or message. She briefly considered calling his parents or his friend Robert, but her pride stopped her. After all, George had left. If he wanted to come back, he could. He could call, text, or show up whenever he wanted. But she wasn't going to look for him. As the second week dragged on, her irritation grew. She couldn't understand where he had gone. She even drove by his workplace, spotting his truck in its usual spot. But George himself was nowhere to be seen. Patricia was slowly beginning to realize that she might have caused far more damage than she had initially imagined, although the full weight of her actions had not yet hit her. Their relationship always seemed solid to her, so how had one simple date turned into such chaos? The more she replayed everything in her mind, the more confused she became. It had been 2 weeks since she casually mentioned to George that she had gone on a date with someone. 2 weeks since she had walked into the office and been blindsided by the news of the impending divorce. The shock was still fresh, and the word stunned didn't even begin to describe how she felt. Patricia had always thought George had a flair for drama, but now it was beginning to seem like he was just being irrational. Divorce? Over one date? It seemed utterly ridiculous. Moreover, he had left her a note, asking her to contact his lawyer if she had any questions about the divorce. The nerve! Patricia could barely believe it. Her thoughts drifted back to their shared history. 2 years of dating in school, 7 years of marriage, and now she was being asked to consult a lawyer? As if she couldn't handle this without much effort. Half the lawyers in her firm were already eyeing her. But then, a troubling image flashed through her mind. George and Robert together. An unpleasant feeling crept into her soul. Could George really be seeing Robert? And even more outrageously, were they planning to get married? The thought seemed absurd, and Patricia couldn't help but smirk. What a joke. She stuffed the divorce papers into her briefcase and went home, convinced that this whole thing would blow over soon. George couldn't possibly be serious about this. He was just trying to force her to apologize, but she wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. However, as time passed, Patricia started to feel a growing sense of frustration. She ate dinner alone, night after night, in their once-shared condo. The silence was becoming unbearable. As time went on, Patricia began to realize just how much she missed George. She had enjoyed his company far more than she had been willing to admit. Now that he was gone, the void he left was becoming unbearable. A sense of guilt started to stir within her. Maybe, just maybe, she had made a mistake. But admitting that was hard, so she devised a plan. She needed more information, and that meant she had to talk to Robert. Patricia knew where Robert liked to hang out, so she deliberately arranged to accidentally run into him one day. When Robert saw her, his first instinct was to run. He always found Patricia intimidating. But she caught him before he could leave, and they exchanged strained greetings. The awkwardness in the air was palpable, and Patricia could feel the tension. Robert knew exactly why she had sought him out, and it made him uneasy. George had already told him everything, and Robert had no desire to get involved in Patricia's schemes. In his opinion, she should have been begging George for forgiveness for how she had treated him. But Patricia, with all her legal skills, found herself at a loss. Her ability to persuade and argue was useless here. The silence between them stretched on until Robert could no longer hold back. "Enough with the games!" he exploded, his irritation boiling over. "You're here because you want to know where George is and you think I'll help you. Well, guess what, Patricia? Screw you. He loved you, and you treated him like garbage. You broke his heart, laughed at him, and now you're surprised that he wants a divorce?" Patricia blinked, startled by the venom in Robert's voice, but she still didn't grasp that he wasn't going to help her. "Come on, Robert," she tried to smooth things over. "This is just a misunderstanding. If you tell me where to find him, we can fix everything." Robert had always gone along with whatever Patricia said. She was incredibly beautiful, the woman of his dreams, and out of loyalty to George, he had never wanted to cause any problems. But now, seeing her true nature, he felt no obligation to be kind. She didn't care about George, didn't care about their marriage, and she had proven that with her actions. He was ready to stop playing her games. "Patricia," he said with disdain in his voice, "we both know you're not here by accident. You came for answers, but I don't have any for you. George worshipped you, and you threw it all away for a casual fling. He warned you, but you laughed in his face. And now you're shocked that he's moving on? Let him go. Enjoy your pretty boys." He walked past her without even sparing a glance, leaving without looking back. Patricia stood frozen, stunned by his words, but soon brushed off the entire situation. She convinced herself that Robert was no different from the others, just another man trying to seduce her, not worthy of her attention. Yet despite her outward confidence, something inside her remained unsettled, and she felt the urge to talk to someone. But who? Emily was out of the question. Her friend had once hinted she dreamed of having a partner like George. Her parents weren't an option either. They always admired George. In the end, Patricia decided to do nothing. Time passed, exactly 4 months, until a court summons left her with no choice. Reluctantly, she turned to a divorce attorney from her firm, one who specialized in divorces. After laying out her situation, the attorney advised her to proceed with the divorce. Though Patricia hesitated, clinging to a hope of saving the marriage, the barrage of legal questions soon made her position clear. "Have you spoken to your husband since he left?" the attorney asked. "No," she replied quietly. "Have you continued seeing Connor or anyone else?" "Not Connor." Her voice hardened. "He turned out to be a selfish jerk, but I have needs too." "Do you really think your husband wants to reconcile?" the attorney pressed. Patricia faltered. Doubts began creeping into her mind. She thought she might have destroyed something good, but still believed that if she spoke to George, they could fix things. In the end, she agreed to meet with him, though reluctantly accepted the inevitability of the divorce. However, the divorce attorney was puzzled. Was this the same Patricia rumored around the office? The woman supposedly always on the lookout for a new man? Now she seemed completely blind to the fact that George had emotionally checked out long ago. There was no chance he would come back, whether or not he had someone else. Patricia just didn't see it. When the day came, they met in George's attorney's office. Patricia thought he looked surprisingly good, while George couldn't help but notice how worn out she appeared. It was obvious. She hadn't been sleeping, had lost a lot of weight, and was clearly under immense stress. But despite all of that, Patricia still didn't grasp the full picture. So, after some polite small talk, she decided to ask George directly. "What does all of this mean, George? I went on one innocent date, and you're blowing it up to the point of filing for divorce?" she demanded. George sighed, tired of this conversation. She really didn't understand. "I warned you, Patricia. I told you this would destroy us." His tone was firm but calm. "Do you really think that date meant nothing? You didn't even sleep with the guy? What about the lingerie you wore for him, the one you never wore for me? You enjoyed flaunting yourself in front of him, just like you did with the others before him. You humiliated me, made me feel worthless, and I was the one you said you loved?" His voice grew slightly louder. "No, Patricia. You've always thought only about yourself. What you needed, what you could get. This marriage? It was never about us. And just so you know, that same Friday I went on a date too. It went well, really well. In fact, I'm planning to marry her as soon as the divorce is finalized. So sign the papers and let me go." George stood up, his words hanging in the air, and he left without looking back. Patricia sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. The full weight of the situation hit her. She had indeed ruined everything. But it was too late now. She had already agreed to the divorce, and when it was finalized, she left with half of the assets, including the apartment. Years passed. Patricia dated handsome men, went through failed relationships, and even dealt with some health issues. It was only after seeing a therapist that she realized the painful truth. She needed to grow up. By then, there were many regrets. but none weighed as heavily as the loss of George, the one man she had truly pushed away. Although she eventually met someone kind and reliable, nothing would ever compare to what she once had with George. This regret would haunt her for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, George's life moved on. He went on that fateful date, and by midweek he wasn't exchanging messages with Megan or Robert, but with someone else. Megan, one of his colleagues, had never liked Patricia. She was sharp-tongued and quick to judge people's characters. So when George, another colleague, came to work upset after a fight with Patricia, Megan immediately sensed that something had happened. Over lunch, George told her the whole story. Megan liked George, quite a lot. He wasn't like the other engineers, not arrogant or overconfident. As it turned out, Megan had a daughter 3 years younger than George. Soon, she gave him her daughter's phone number. That evening, George wasn't texting Megan or Robert, but Megan's daughter, which marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. George soon learned that Abigail was single and thriving in her stable and well-paid career. Unlike him, she had an infectious smile that could light up any room, and there was no denying that she was very attractive. However, what mattered most to him was that she eagerly agreed to go on a date with him the following Friday. His wife, Patricia, was not a part of this new chapter in his life that he envisioned, and her absence from this date would definitively mark the changes in their relationship. Judging by the hints from Abigail's mother, nothing stood in their way. Abigail felt that George would make a wonderful companion for her, and her intuition proved to be right. Shortly after George and Patricia's divorce was officially finalized, he married Abigail. Their bond was genuine, built on mutual love, and they lived a happy marriage, filled with passion and deep affection, which lasted forever. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.